Hey everybody, this video is going to be showing how I do a packing replacement on a 6-inch OSY valve. This is a Clow model from 2004, but many are very similar. Some of the newest ones of different companies use O-rings, but this is a very typical old OSY Gate valve. This is on a Watts 709 Fireline. But again, this is a very typical valve for a lot of 6-inch backflows. This same training will work for a 4, a 6, or an 8, even larger, as long as they have the same kind of packing nut. So I've already contacted the company that this feeds, and I've asked them to put their system in test mode, the fire system in test mode. That way, in case any flow comes out of here, if it drains part of their system, it's not going to set off the flow switch, and which could potentially set off the flow switch would set off the fire alarm. So in test mode, it shouldn't do that. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to replace the packing on both of the assemblies. So I have my wrench for turning the valve off. You can also use a pipe wrench. I've definitely used pipe wrenches in the past. Our packing nuts are steel. Our bolts, the packing bolts, are steel. Now they do make this in a stainless model, and I would recommend, if you can get stainless square head packing bolts, go for it. They make packing nuts in brass. I've seen it in brass. This is stainless. I prefer stainless. Been doing this for many years. Whenever you're using stainless, you must use anti-seize and use food grade, because it's on a potable assembly. And I go ahead and I coat the whole thing in food grade. Some people won't. You could do pipe dope as well. Might make the steel bolt last a little longer to coat the whole thing in anti-seize. Might. So, all right. Another tool I have is a corkscrew, and they have different tips. This is like the larger tip, works better for the larger assemblies, and I'll show you how to use that in a little bit. And then I just have a general, like a pruning cutter, or you could use a knife to cut the packing. In all the years I've been doing packing replacements, it seems like the best place to get it is Palmetto Packings. They make it in different types. This is a graphite version, but I've also had it in like wax, like white wax. So I guess that's an option too. This particular one is 3/8, and 3/8 works good for 6s, 8s, maybe 10s. If you're doing it on a 4-inch, you're probably going to use 1/4-inch packing, which is the other packing I use. Now let's say you're working on a 4-inch and you don't have any 1/4-inch packing. You can take this packing, lay it on something flat, and tap it, and you'll smush it out. You'll smush it, and then you can use it on 4-inch. And let's say a 10-inch uses thicker packing than this, and you don't have that packing. Could be 1/2 inch. So you could actually layer in extra 3/8 into it, layering it in. It'll still work. And same with this. So let's say you don't have any 3/8 packing, but you got a bunch of 1/4-inch packing. In a pinch, you could lay in a whole bunch of 1/4-inch packing, and that'll still work. I've done it. All right. So there's two different ways you could replace the packing. One is to make sure the valve is fully open, and that makes sure that the gate inside is pushing up and sealing, and you can replace the packing that way. But more often than not, if the valve is old, that ain't gonna work. It's still gonna leak. As you can see, water's still coming through. So if you try to take this off right now, it's probably start spraying. So the the usual way that I do it is I go ahead and close the valve. And again, this is a Fireline, so I've already notified the company to put their system in test mode, just in case there's any flow that comes back and their foot valve on their riser is not holding. All right, so that does hold. So now we're ready to remove the bolts. All right, so oftentimes these bolts are rusted. So you can just loosen them up. Up both sides. That's fine if you want to do that. The other thing I'm going to show you, because these bolts are so often rusted out, so the other thing I have is this angle grinder, and I'll use this just for the sake of the video to cut off the bolts. This is a 4.5-inch angle grinder, and it works pretty good. Sometimes it won't cut through completely once the blades cut through a few, but you can just take your wrench and just turn the nut and it'll just break off. So we're going to do this. So you just do that, tap it, might be a little warm. If you have a screwdriver, you can, oh, there we go. You just take the lower part of that nut off. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Alright, so I got that bolt out. So now you got your packing nut right here. So you may notice that it doesn't hold. There's nothing to hold it. Some valves will actually have a recessed area here so you can turn the nut into it and it will hold, but most don't. So what we need to do here is set up some zip ties, and we're going to zip tie this to the handle. So there we go. Now it is zip tied. Now we can have access to this. So here's where the corkscrew comes in. There's a whole bunch of packing down there, or what's left of the packing, that is packed in there. So we're going to take the corkscrew. Now it works better when I'm using two hands, and I'll use two hands in a moment. But you kind of put it down in there, and then you turn it. You push and turn. So you have one hand turning the handle and one hand pushing and guiding the corkscrew at the bottom. And once you dig in, then you pull. You'll pull the packing out. Sometimes it comes out together, sometimes it comes out in pieces. So you can have either one. Alright, so now I'm going to start pulling, and nothing came out. This packing is going to come out in little tiny pieces. It's Probably been in there many years. All right, so in this case, you're just gonna have to chisel, dig out little by little what packing's in there. So I was able to get this out. There's plenty more of that in here. You're gonna have to clean it all out until you get down to the bottom, the epoxy surface of the bottom. So I just corkscrewed in there, and I was able to pull out this chunk. That's all I'm doing. I'm going in there, I'm screwing it in, pulling out what I can. So far I've been in there probably 4 or 5 times. All right, here we go. Now some of it's coming out in a larger piece. It's almost done. You can pretty much see the bottom there. There's a little piece left over here I gotta get. All right, I got it out. That's all that I got. You can kind of see the epoxy red on the bottom. Something that some people will do, I don't really recommend it, but what they would do is they would just, instead of using the corkscrew to pull any of it out, they would just layer on new packing on top of it and compress it. I mean, that might work for a while, but the best thing to do is just to pull out all the old packing. All right, now we're getting ready to put this in. If you're looking for a source, I mean, obviously the internet now is probably, there's plenty of people selling this, but for years I've purchased this at McMaster Car, but I'm sure that there's other places that maybe have a better price on it. But McMaster Cars always had it in stock, and the various types too, the wax version and so on. So I'm going to cut a little more than a foot. I'm going to start layering it in there. We may need to add a little bit more, but we may need to cut off a little bit. All right, and while I'm getting ready, I'll share, many years ago my first manager taught me his way of doing it. And what he would do is he would measure around, and he would cut a little bit beyond where they overlap, and then he would cut, so I can do this, he would cut an angle on one side, and then the other side he'd cut the opposite angle, so that when they come together, they lay together and they compress on each other. So I did that for a few years, but then I realized some of these newer OSYs that I was working on, I'd be pulling out this long packing. So then I just decided to start layering in a whole long section, and that works for me too. So start pushing it in on one side, feed it through, and feed it through again. Push it through. And push it through. All right, so just pushing it through. We're starting to get pretty tight. A little bit extends above the bottom, and that's fine. We're going to bring the nut down in a moment, and then we're going to start compressing it. Sometimes it squeezes out, sometimes it doesn't, but I might end up cutting a bit of this off if it gives me any hassle. So we may cut like 1/2 inch of that off. All right. All right, I'm gonna cut by. There we go. Now we're gonna get the bolts ready. All right, I didn't show it earlier, but I need to have these two washers in here too. Anytime you're using stainless steel nuts bolts, you need to use pipe dope or anti-seize, because if you don't and you start cranking down on it, your stainless is going to gall, and then it's going to get stuck on your bolt and you won't be able to tighten it or loosen it. You'll have to cut the bolt off again. So always use pipe dope or anti-seize, preferably food grade. So I just got done applying anti-seize to all the threads. Now the bolt's only going to be, or the nut's only going to be on the upper part, but I tend to put anti-seize over more of the threads just to kind of give it a little extra rust protection. It might not do anything, but it's just what I do whenever I don't do stainless. If this was a stainless square head bolt, I would only throw the anti-seize up here during the area, in the area that the nut would actually be on the bolt. All right, so we're gonna clean out the areas where the T-bolt's gonna go.
How much room you got in your free tank?
And we're gonna put that up there, put it in. We do the same thing on the other side. Up and in. All right. So now the packing nut needs to be compressed, but what we do is we take it and we lift it up, and then we'll put the washer on it, then we'll put the nut on there and get it started. We'll do the same thing on the other side. We won't tighten one side down until we get both sides bolted up. Alright, so we're gonna rest the washer there, and I can't do this holding the camera, but I'm gonna pull up on here, and as you can see, that gives you some thread. And while I'm pulling up, I'm gonna try to spin it. Okay, all right, there we go. Perfect. Now I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, and then I'll use my wrench to tighten it down. All right, so now we've got both nuts on. We're just gonna kind of evenly tighten them. Couple turns on this side, and then we're going to do a couple turns on this side. And then you got to look at the packing underneath to see if it's squishing out. If it's squishing out, you're going to have to loosen and kind of push it in with a screwdriver. All you got to do is just kind of push it in with a screwdriver, compress it. So far, this looks pretty good. And we're gonna go back and forth. We're gonna tighten this side a little bit, this side a little bit, this side, and keep the nut even. And you wanna make sure the nut's even and not this way or this way. So you're trying to bring it down evenly. All right, so it's compressing well. There's a little bit sticking out over here. I'm just gonna kind of push it in with a screwdriver. I think everything will be fine with this. I don't probably even need to do this, but boom. All right, we'll continue to tighten it down. All right, I've tightened it down. I don't want to tighten it too tight. You don't want to unnecessarily tighten the packing any tighter than you absolutely have to. So I'm going to start opening this valve. Now, even though the system is on test mode for their fire system, still open these valves very slow, because you just never know. I've had systems in test mode and they've still alarmed. It's not enjoyable to have the fire department show up. But anyway, so now we're gonna slowly open this. And it will start leaking, and we'll tighten it more once the stem is up. So So now it's starting to spin easy, and then it's going to get harder potentially. And then it's fine. It must be it's pressurized on the other side. Sometimes it'll spin for a couple of turns and it'll get really hard, and that's when it's about ready to start supplying water again. Okay, yeah, it's pressurized. So okay. Now, I open them like that, where I tighten them. But if you're working, and there may be some people that say you're supposed to leave one turn before it's completely bottomed out, which is typical for distribution main valves. You want to, if you've opened them up all the way, you want to turn them down one turn, which gives you some option to wiggle back and forth to exercise the valve. So that might be a good rule for these as well. So I've done it both ways. All right, so we got a little bit of trickle. So we're going to keep tightening. Until the trickle stops. Again, we don't want to tighten unnecessarily tight, because then you're just compressing the packing more than you need to. All right, looks like it stopped. I'm gonna let it drain a little bit and start working on the other one, but we'll just look at it to make sure that it's not continuing to drip after a few minutes. If it is still dripping, then just tighten a few more turns and watch it again. So all right guys, hey, thanks for watching my video, and I'm not here saying this is the only way, but this is the way that works for me. So if y'all have any comments, I'd love to hear your comments on how you have something that works better or more efficient. I'd love to learn. I'm not opposed to learning. So thanks for watching, guys.